Good day, everybody. How's it going out there? Man, we just keep growing. We just keep going. We just keep growing. Lot of furry convention news. A lot of interesting furry convention news. So we're going to get right to it, and we're going to get right to the big one, the big news. Anthrocon has made its announcements for its plans in 2025, and that is they're growing too much, and we must stop a little bit, just a little bit. So they do have the idea that they're going to be limiting attendance. If you recall last year, this last Anthrocon we had, and we did a follow-up video on that, is that there were people in line for like hours and hours and hours of time, like on the Thursday. Like they were in line for 3 to 5 hours. And there was just so many people, doing that kind of thing. So some of the announcements that Anthrocon has made is supposed to try to alleviate some of that. For instance, Thursday pickup for badges is going to be pre-reg only. You can't buy at the door on Thursday, which will probably speed things up a little bit. But they also indicated that there will be an attendance cap. If you're hearing this, it's probably a bit too late because they made that announcement right before people could sign up. So same with me though I'm kind of ebbing away from the larger conventions myself personally, but obviously a lot of people like going to Anthrocon and it's a tradition, and unfortunately, like if you're to make that tradition, you're gonna have to get a little lucky, and hopefully you do. So here is the basically the announcement from Anthrocon. There will be a link in the description as always for these things. So, announcement from the chairman. It is no secret that the furry fandom and conventions have exploded in growth over a span of just a few years. We've taken into account feedback we've received, our own observations, and our responsibility to provide a safe, accessible, and manageable convention experience for all. In the interest of transparency and allowing attendees to make preparations, we'd like to share some of our plans, starting with the registration capacity, Thursday pre-registration pickup, shuttle accessibility, and size standards of our fursuit parade. Please watch/listen to the video below as Uncle Kage, the chairman of Anthrocon, but you're literally announcing it as the chairman. You don't have to, shares some of the important updates that the Anthrocon Board of Directors has in mind for 2025. While we continue to work on the details and specific changes, we believe that we must take these steps in order to ensure we can handle the growth and demands of today's furry fandom, while balancing the complexities that our diverse community brings. Summary of key points. Attendance numbers for Anthrocon 2025 will be monitored and, if necessary, will be capped should the number exceed the accessible safety standards for our venue and our operations. Any confirmed registration cap will be announced in advance of pre-registration closure. Thursday registration will be pre-registration pickup only. No Thursday passes will be available, and on-site registration will start on the Friday of the event. Hotel shuttles are being improved to accommodate wheelchair/ADA needs on all buses rather than on all call buses. The fursuit parade will be exploring a limit to the participants and standards for participation to help manage the parade safely. More details to announce at a later date. The idea is that there was also a lot of complaints in the past few years about the parade. It goes outside, and I think it was like 2 hours long from stem to stern this last year, and there was a lot of people. And like people are coming to watch this thing. It's not just the furries. So like this impromptu, like, yeah, let's just have a big old conga line thing is kind of changing. And things will be better and things will be worse. Like there's a lot of ideas and thoughts about like maybe like planning to get things going before the line goes, and like grouping people up in certain things like certain species or certain costume types and stuff like that. I would say that and obviously like it's going to be a lot of work to kind of provide that like. Yes, you can come in, like to have the bouncer like saying you can come in, you can go out. And it's going to be a lot of heartache for a lot of people who want to be a part of the fursuit parade but don't have like like the coolest costume ever. I don't know how the stipulation is going to go. Obviously, there's a new poodling, things like that, partial fursuit at least, right? There's ideas and thoughts of that. So just be aware of it before you go in and before you register. It's like if you're going just to get into the fursuit parade, make sure that maybe go to another convention and see if it works out first, or like how that happens. It obviously, unfortunately, as spaces get limited and things like that, decisions like that are going to have to happen. If they are going to go the direction of like, let's get all the roos together, or let's get all these things together, they may want to consider having panels prior to the convention of like, sort of like how the Midwest Fur Fest has the menagerie, and like it's like, oh, we have like these picture groups, and we're gonna put these picture groups in these picture groups, right? Like before the parade starts, like have like little picture groups, like of the different types, like superhero furries, or roo furries, or things like that, or species, or huskies, or something, like getting the things together. And then sort of like taking the pictures in the little cluster, and then saying like, stick with your cluster, as you go, and organizing it, and sort of mixing the menagerie logistics with like the parade logistics would be interesting. But obviously it's pretty short notice to have that happen in 2025. So it's going to be an evolving thing, and it's interesting. And I think interestingly, it's like it gets rid of the whole rat race thing that we were talking about with the thing. So if Midwest Fur Fest does beat Anthrocon this year, then officially, in my mind, 2017 was the last time Anthrocon was the largest furry convention in the world. As long as there's no cap issues that occur with Midwest Fur Fest, which it could. I mean, it was very crowded the last time I went to Midwest Fur Fest in certain areas, so maybe similarly they're going to have crowding issues and dealing with crowds and stuff like that as well. But it just comes to show that this is happening, and not only Anthrocon. There's a lot of other ones too. Two other points kind of came up here. In Southern California, we have Ontario, California. We have another FurryCon. I'm not being sardonic. That is the name of the convention. It is called Another FurryCon, and right now it had its premiere year this year in 2024. In late September, and it was top 13. Crazy. 3,533, which beats like the previous, record holder by about 1,000. Now, the interesting thing about this is that it shows that there is a demand, but it also shows that there was demand for the area that was stifled. And that's sort of the common theme. It's like, where do I want to start up a furry convention that's going to get like so much attention really quick? It seems like the pattern is look for an area that had a furry convention and basically lost that furry convention due to circumstances outside of the convention's control, either within the year or in a few years later, because that area and that territory of Ontario, California is in the same sort of region that Califur was in, which was more near Irvine. It was closer to the city than Ontario, California, but it's in that same service area, Southern California. And after Califur broke down after 2017, there wasn't really a convention to service furries in that particular region. And the previous record holder that had 2,000 was Denver. Denver's premiere year had like 2,300 to 500 furries. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was in the mid 2000s range. And the reason that one took off and blew up right off the get-go is because of the issue with Rocky Mountain FurCon, which I covered on this channel. It's one of my most watched videos, so most people are familiar with that story. If you're not, then go ahead and search it on my channel. But basically, that particular convention, it exploded because of that particular thing. Rocky Mountain FurCon was canceled because of circumstances and turmoil within the convention that caused issues of them holding it. Same thing sort of happened with Califer, only it was sort of outside forces, not really within, from without, like coming down and bearing upon that particular convention space and causing turmoil and issues that they couldn't hold it at the venue because it was causing too much issues and drama and security costs, as it were. But you can watch either the Califer closing video or the Rocky Mountain Fur Con closing videos on the other thing, just to keep it in mind. So, another sign of growth, and us hitting the ceiling. But another sign for Midwest Fur Fest this year, speaking of Midwest Fur Fest and talking about the difficulties that they're going to face when it comes to growth, seem to be coming from the business venues of this thing. Here is a tweet by someone named Callie the Burb. Basically, they said, "We got lucky and got a room in the main hotel for Fur Fest, but let's talk. This is the price at the Hilton connected to the Sky Bridge." So if you don't know the layout, the Hilton is basically one hotel over from the Hyatt, which the Hyatt is usually where a lot of the main convention space is, as far as like ballrooms and things like that. Obviously, like over time, the Midwest Fur Fest has actually moved into the actual David Lawrence Convention Center. Is it David Lawrence? Steve? Is it Steve? No, David Lawrence is Pennsylvania. Is Anthrocon. The football guy. The other convention center, the one in Rosemont, the Rosemont Convention Center. I'm just going to call it that because I know it's Steve somebody, but I don't know football, okay? I don't know the name of the guy. Ironically, I know who the name of David Lawrence, but I don't even know what David Lawrence is known for. I know what the convention center for Midwest is known for, but I don't know the name of the guy. I know what the name of the Pittsburgh one is, but I don't know what they're known for. Professional. Anyways, just a guy anyway. Just some guy who had a whole building named after him. What do you got doing, Andrew? Anyway, we're clearly professionals here. Anyways, long of the short of me not knowing things, let's go back to the things I do know. So basically, the Midwest Fur Fest moved their convention center into that particular area and like into that convention center. So like having a room at the Hyatt does give you like sort of, historically gives you sort of center stage, but there's an entire block of hotels around the convention center, so like it does centralize the stuff more, so it's not as important to get the Hyatt. But the Hilton is one of those hotels. It's in that L block, and unfortunately, some of the hotels in that L block are not like basically partners with Midwest Fur Fest and trying to work with them to lower the hotel rooms. So what they do is they take advantage of that. And Callie the Burb says, yeah, don't pay this. Don't ever pay this. The con is not worth it. No convention is worth this much. The normal rate for this hotel is $131 a night on any other weekend. So basically what we're seeing here is that for a one king bed for two adults, this is not even a 4-room. So this is just like two, one room for two people. They're basically putting it at about $450, between $450 and $500 a night. So for December 2nd, it's $459. For December 5th, $478, $478, $478, $478. So to stay at that hotel after taxes of $332.28, which is almost one night in and of itself, even more than a night on a normal weekend, quote unquote, the total that you'd be paying for a stay is $2,700 to stay at the hotel for Midwest Fur Fest. So obviously when we're talking about, when I'm saying like, well, if Midwest Fur Fest is able to, defeat one last time Anthrocon this year, it can maintain its lead. That's the kind of STEMI that it's kind of going up against, is that they know what they got now. Basically, furry's been growing so much over the last few decades that the cities know what they got now, and the hotels know what they got now. And if there's some greedy guys, they're gonna be like, "Give me that cheddar." And it looks like that's what's happening here at that one hotel. Obviously, I would say that is it worth it? That's up to the like anything that costs money. That's up to the individual. Don't go into debt for it. That's all I can say. Midwest Fur Fest isn't like it's a good con. I don't know if I would spend $3,000 for it. I'm just saying it's because then it's like it puts way too much pressure. You know what I mean? It's like you spend $3,000 on the hotel room, and then you're like, well, this thing better blow my socks off. And it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then you're going to be mad and you're going to be frustrated because, like, I spent $3,000 on this hotel room. I spent $3,000 on this freaking hotel room. I'm going to have a good time, dang it. You know? So, yeah, use your discretion. That's not the thing I wanted to do. But don't hold your breath. All right. So, yeah, just be aware. And always, like, look for a more local scene. I think that as furry has grown incredibly rapid and incredibly, like, all over the place, I think we need to start looking for diversified locations. There's furry conventions starting up everywhere in a lot of places. Look local, look small, and you'll probably find a lot more than by trying to find, what you're looking for in a big spot. Obviously, you're going to meet people at bigger conventions that you might normally meet, but, dealing with people in a smaller space to me is always a little more worthwhile. I've always enjoyed smaller gatherings. I think Worldwide Fur Camp was pretty fun, and the larger ones are just kind of like these days. Obviously, if I go to a larger one, I usually try to do a panel on nonfiction. I did that at Furry Weekend Atlanta. Everyone has their own reasons for going to these things, but and if you can volunteer. One of the things that's interesting about this growth thing story is that, they're talking about, like, they're keeping an eye on the convention and attendance numbers, but they never really gave a hard number. And I think that kind of tells me that there's variables here that they're taking into consideration. That exceed the acceptable safety standards of our venue and our operations. So there's two parts to that, right? Venue and operations. So obviously, if they don't have the operations to support the thing, then the number is going to be lower. And volunteer and staff are the things that kind of take that into consideration. So if you want Anthrocon to be able to continue to grow and you're going to Anthrocon, maybe consider volunteering and or doing that. And I think that, interestingly, this hidden cap thing may influence that, right? It'd be interesting if I think that that's something that they might consider and they could possibly do is go, well, we're at a cap, but if you volunteer for X amount of time, then maybe we can find one more position, right? Especially if but you have to volunteer for X amount of time, otherwise you're not going to be allowed in next year or something like that. It seems kind of a weird ultimatum, but it's like if the cap is reached and you go, well, I'm looking to volunteer, maybe they might go, like, are you willing? Like maybe they should do that. I don't know if they did that on this because I didn't try to register, but like if they have like are you willing to volunteer? If are you willing to volunteer for the convention? If there ends up being, or what is your interest in volunteering for the convention or something like that? I don't know what the legalities and stuff like that is. I'll leave that to people with more decision power than myself, but I think that would be interesting I think, and if that's something that is causing a cap in our conventions, is the lack of volunteers and lack of people willing to, do that. Because time is precious and money is scarce, and volunteering is tough, and it's getting harder and harder to find volunteers these days. I volunteer my time for this stuff, but this is relatively, I would say, not as stressful as having to deal with people on the ground at a convention. And it's like, well, why don't you volunteer at a convention to find out? It's like, because I find it a conflict of interest. Somebody had offered one time, it's like, man, you should volunteer for the staff at this convention. I'm like, it'd be interesting, but I work too hard as it is. Number one, everyone works hard, but I'm a workaholic as it is, and I just don't need another thing that I'm working hard at. Number two, it is the conflict of interest. If I volunteer for a convention and I find out something about somebody that I shouldn't have found out or wouldn't have found out otherwise, it's like basically almost NDA level, right? It's like if I find out something about an attendee and have to, deal with them, at their worst moment and have information about them at their worst moment, but I'm not supposed to share that kind of a thing, it kind of draws a conflict of interest with me talking about furries and, furry people and things like that. If I find out about problematic behavior, but I can't disclose it because of an NDA, like I don't want to get into that sort of trap. But hopefully there will be other volunteers and things like that. It is never easy, and hopefully as we continue to grow, we'll continue to know better ways of doing things. And congratulations to the furries at hitting the ceiling at Pittsburgh. Hopefully there'll be more ceilings to hit to come, and hopefully as we hit those ceilings, we learn how to grow things even more. I mean, other options would be like, there's a Pennsylvania weekend getaway kind of a thing at a camp somewhere, and it's like, what if you had like the Fallout go to a different thing, and if you don't get past the it's like, hey, we had these you got into Anthrocon, it's like you registered for this con, but are you willing to do like the fall off thing where it's like, hey, we have this other venue where we have a smaller staff, and they're working in that area, but they're completely separate, right? There's no cross intermingling going to be happening. And then in the virtual spaces, have oh, sorry, you couldn't get into our main convention. Hey, if you want to spend half the money, we're having a virtual sort of, shindig in this, not as big as Ferality, obviously, but these small get-togethers and instances that will have the Anthrocon shows going on, and you can chat with other furries in VR, and at obviously at a reduced rate than actually attending at the convention. But that allows Anthrocon to continue growing opportunity, even though their in-person quota has been capped. And I think that's something, ironically, that Kage is going to have to consider, even though Kage kind of saw, I think, virtual reality as a threat more than as an ally. But now that we have dealt with this issue of great space and growing pains, it may need to come down to using virtual spaces as an ally rather than as a rival. And I think it'll offer an opportunity for Anthrocon to continue growing its revenue and growing its opportunities, and maybe using some of that extra revenue to hire actual staff. Staff, not just volunteers, pay people to help with the convention if that's the issue that's causing it that's forcing it to not be able to go past a certain point. So there's a lot of opportunities out there, and it's interesting, and I hope you found it interesting too. So if you did, kick that like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section. Thank you guys very much for watching, and have a good rest of your week. We will see you guys next time.